Hello everyone and welcome to the BIS International Women's Celebration event. We're delighted that you can join us and we are absolutely thrilled to have such powerhouse women here with us, joining our panel and talking to you a little bit about their inspirations and their career experiences so far. Clearly today is its day, so it's the perfect day for us at the BIS as UK national coordinators for World Space Week to launch what is going to be a whole year space-related activities, given that Women in Space is the World Space Week theme for 2021. If you are new to the BIS, do take the opportunity after this is finished to learn a bit more about what we do. We are here to promote space across all of the public within the UK and internationally, whether you work in it, whether you're studying, whether you're thinking of getting involved with it, or whether you just love looking up and what's out there. I'm delighted to introduce our fantastic speakers this evening, and I will be chairing this event as the Chief Executive of the BIS, Elizabeth Anderson, and we have Dr. Alice Bunn, who is the International Director of the UK Space Agency, Hessa Matroushi, who is the Science Lead for the Emirates Project Hope mission, and we have Liz Seward, who is Senior Space Strategist. So I'm now going to ask our panelists just to introduce themselves. If you have any questions as we go along, do just pop them in the Ask a Question box, those very shortly. So, Alice, let's start with you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening, everyone. So my name's Alice Bunn. I've been working in the space sector for a really long time now, on and off. So I first started working in space in the year 2000, so over 20 years now, which amazes me when I say it out loud. I say on and off because I've had a number of different roles over that period, and I also had a very significant career break when my children were little. But I'm currently International Director of UK Space Agency, and what that means is I've got responsibility for our international partnerships in the round, including leading the UK delegation to the European Space Agency, heading up a new international policy team, quite exciting at the moment, looking at extending our range of partnerships beyond Europe, heading up the UK space security activities, and also our education and outreach programme too. On top of that, I sit on the Council of the Royal Aeronautical Society, I sit on the World Economic Forum Council of Space Technologies, and I sit on the Board of Directors of the US Space Foundation.
Fantastic.
Shall I hand back to you, Elizabeth? To you. Or shall I go around the table?
Let's move on to Hessa.
Hello, everyone. This is Hessa Matroushi. I would like to give you a brief introduction about myself, and I can start since I graduated. So I graduated from the American University of Sharjah back in 2012 as an electrical engineer. And then I took my master's in engineering system management directly after that, and I got it in 2015. But I got my master's while I was working. So I entered the space sector back in 2013. So it had been around 8 years since that. And I started working in Mohammed Space Center, and at that time it was called the Emirates Institution for Advanced Science and Technology. And when I started in the space sector, I started as an associate image processing engineer. So like back in there, like we had like DubaiSat-1 and DubaiSat-2 Earth observation satellites, which I worked on analyzing their data, conducting a lot of scientific analyses, and even developing some applications that can speed up the analysis processes, like detecting automatically the water in the images or detecting the changes between like the same place and from time to time. And then in 2014, I became the deputy project manager of KNIFE-1. KNIFE-1 is the first CubeSat that was owned by the United Arab Emirates. And it was a program to teach students in the university how to build satellites from a system engineering point of view. And it was launched successfully in 2017. And then in 2015, this is where I became part of the Emirates Mars mission. I became part of the science team of the mission. And at first, I led the science data analysis team. Then in October last year, I became the science lead for the mission. And while I'm working in a lot of the projects within the center, within the structure of it, I'm the senior manager of the Earth and Planetary Science section, where I focus on developing the national capabilities that we have in terms of planetary science, and we conduct scientific studies for primary and secondary payloads, depending on the missions that the center undertakes. And we focus as well on a lot of scientific outreach programs where we try to reach out to the public, to the students, to the younger generation, to engage them more in space science. And while I'm working on these projects, I'm also a part of the UAE astronaut program. I'm the deputy science lead, where we select the scientific experiments that the astronauts in our missions undertake within their time in the International Space Station.
Thank you, Hessa. That absolutely sounds fascinating. It really just does. Liz, could you follow that?
First of all, I just have to sort of apologize for my cat diving in. He is called Cosmos, so he is half allowed in a BIS event. So yeah, I'm Liz Seward. I work for Airbus Defence and Space in the UK, in Stevenage. I started out by studying physics with space science and technology at university, and then my first role was as a thermal engineer, so designing the subsystem, the thermal subsystem of satellites. And I actually sat near the Future Programs group, which were doing a much more interesting job. So I managed to switch positions and work on future programs. So we looked at landing on asteroids, and at the time, the very far-fetched idea of sending a rover to Mars. And I worked on the ExoMars rover mission in its early days. It will launch next year to be the European contribution to Mars exploration. And it's going to be very exciting to see that and to join some of the other missions around the planet. So from there, I actually moved into a role in marketing and communications in the business development side of the world. And now I'm in the strategy team. So I'm responsible for space strategy across Airbus transnationally, and then also with a focus on the UK. And it's a really exciting time to be doing UK activities with the sort of national space program coming online, the investment into OneWeb, and there's lots of things changing. I also, as part of my role, link in with the Seraphim Venture Capital Fund and sit on their advisory board, so see the new startup companies arriving in the UK. And I also help their Space Camp Accelerator program. And then I'm on the board of Women in Aerospace Europe and part of the UK local group, which is very pertinent for today, sort of trying to increase the diversity of the space sector and then helping us get more women into senior leadership roles. And it's great to be part of the panel today.
Thank you all. So grateful for you joining us this evening. I know you all have really busy jobs, and I'm sure you're all in demand for International Women's Day, so very grateful. Set piece questions is really thinking about who particularly inspired you in your career. The BIS is going here on past, present, and future faces in the space sector. So it'd be great to hear about some of the faces that maybe. So, Hessa, would you like to kick off?
Sure. When it comes to inspiration about the space industry, like within the United Arab Emirates, like the space industry is still considered new. Like the Mohammed Space Center started back in 2006, and the project that they've been working on wasn't popular a lot. Like when it comes to the community, like space wasn't one of the common fields that we usually had. But when it comes to personally my career, like I would say, like my mom was one of the #1 supporters and inspiration to me, because although she didn't have a lot of knowledge about the space industry, she would be the one who would always like make me believe and make me step forward, and she would push me to take the next step. She wouldn't know what I'm doing, but she would be like, go for it. Like, you should try this new opportunity, and then you shouldn't limit yourself. And that started back even in the university when people were saying like engineering might be for men and not for women. And she would be like, no, if you wanted, you have to go for it. So She had been my #1 supporter, and I'm really thankful for her. And even during my career, like I had to do a lot of travels, like to United States, to Europe, with really long flights, and she would be the one who's always there with me. Like that was amazing, like for her, because to me, like she put a really good example how to enable a person to be their best. She's a great example on how a leader should support their team to make them flourish and reach their fullest potential. And that was really amazing.
I think that was really, thank you for sharing that, Hessa. And I think a lot of people, even in this country, it's not necessarily seen as realistic if they say, as a teenager, I want to get a job in the space sector. And so, yes, having that level of support, I'm sure, is absolutely crucial, and something I'm sure that will resonate with some of our night. How about you, Alice?
Yeah, what a lovely testament, Hessa. I really enjoyed hearing that. For me, I can point to a really, really legendary figure in the space sector who I had the good fortune to witness working with close hand. So her name's Barbara Ryan. She's an American citizen. I came across her first when she took over something called GEO, which was like an international collaboration really around encouraging the sharing of environmental data. So it was a time when I was working in Earth observation, and I had a little to do with this organization, but it was under the leadership of a man who shall remain nameless, but he was running the show in a very, very directive way. So really, really hard-edged, you know, all of his negotiation skills were around enforcing people to do things, enforcing people to adopt all the kind of standards and processes that he wanted to put in place. And guess what? It wasn't hugely successful. And I witnessed Barbara come in and just took a completely different approach. It was so refreshing to see. Pretty much her first question was always, you know, how do I make this easier for you? How do we approach this so by sharing this data we will get a better collective outcome? And it was really, really inspiring to see such a change in leadership, such a different approach, a very gentle approach actually, and a very empathetic approach, but it was very, very powerful in delivering outcomes. As a result of her leadership style, she got far more buy-in, and there was a much greater sharing of environmental data that was ever going to be achieved, I believe, with that different, more you know, directive approach. So yeah, it was really wonderful to see that.
That's brilliant. Having an inspiration like that, actually, that you can learn from yourself. I mean, fantastic, absolutely fantastic leadership skills, very clearly there. How about yourself?
Well, I found this the most awful question, because how do you pick one person? And also a shout out to all the mums, because yeah, my mum was the same, clipped space articles out of scrapbooks when I was 4 or 5 and probably started from there. So I've picked Helen Sharman as mine, with a close second, Sally Ride. So as a teenager, I had a signed photograph of Sally Ride on my wall. And so she was the first person that I had as a women can be in space. But then I read Helen Sharman's book and saw how she had got to be the first Briton in space. And when I was a student at university, I was part of the organisation UK SEDS, and one of the professors actually knew her, and so he invited her to come to meet us. And I managed to be part of a sort of a small group who had lunch with Helen Sharman. So she was my sort of first meeting my space idol, and she was just as impressive in person as she had been in the book, which I think is sadly out of print now, but we should bring it back. And she was a real inspiration, and really just said, you can do it. I know I got to space, imagine what you could do. And I wanted to finish by saying that I was trying to think of, did I have anybody else current who's ever beaten that? And the answer is there's not an individual now, but now I feel that as I've progressed in my career, I've created a network around me of people who inspire me and lift me up when I need it. And one of those is Alice on here. And so the way that the sort of my icons have changed, but they're still amazing women.
That's brilliant. And of course, we're thrilled to have Alice, also thrilled to have Helen Sharman as one of our honorary fellows, and she often gives a lot of her support to the BIS. So it's fantastic to build these net we describe. So Liz, since you are off mute at the moment, when was the moment that you knew the career that you wanted to follow?
Teenager, and so I was already dreaming of space, but I was lucky enough to go on holiday to Houston, again sort of taken by my parents, and we went to the Johnson Space Center, and that was the first time I had seen real space in real life and people working in it and realizing this is something you can do as a job. And a few years ago, my dad actually reminded me that we sat in an auditorium and watched a show showing you, space in daily life. And the camera zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in on a forest. And eventually, standing in the forest was a lady who was tracking a signal from space, doing science of some kind we can't remember now. And he remembers me saying, I could do that and be that person. And so that, I think, was that real moment of the space industry is something real. It isn't just Star Trek, and we can work in it to get to that Star Trek future. So that's what kicked it all off for me. Oh, we've lost Elizabeth, so I'm going to throw it over to Hessa for your answer.
Thank you. I made it.
Thank you, Liz. So I've been always mesmerized by space. Like we go back to the desert and we see like the sky and all the stars in there, and like it had been always an inspiration, but it wasn't something that is within reach within that time. Even like when I grew up, like went to university, like I never thought like UAE would have a space program that one day I might be able to be part of. So it was like something that was a dream that I didn't have like access to at that time. And I was lucky enough after I graduated and was in my master's, I met a colleague who was working in the center at that time, and they introduced me to the space sector, and the space work that the team had been working on. And I was like, really, that existed within UAE? I wasn't aware of that. And then I was able to apply and to get the opportunity to work in there. And then after I got in there and had the experience of it, I was able like to really connect to it. Like space can be so foreign to us. Well, once you tap your hands into the data, for me, like as someone who works with the data, it's something really like out of this world. Like we had Earth observation satellites, so we get images of Earth. And this is for the first time I was looking at images from Earth, not from Google Map, but rather from an actual satellite that was built by like the hands of some engineers who built it. So it was like something really inspiring, and I got connected with it, and I wanted to be part of it because like there is something in there that develops me, that grows me, and space is always unknown. So there is always some mysteries to unravel when it comes to space. And I feel like this current generation is very lucky, especially in the United Arab Emirates. They have a lot of opportunities right now to engage in such field. So they don't have to wait until graduation. Even from university or even within schools, there are a lot of workshops. There are a lot of research opportunities, visits that people can grasp on, so they can be part of this sector even before they graduate and have their degrees. And this is something exciting because I believe like if you want to like really test if this is the career path that you want, then you need to try it out. Like this is the only way that you would be able to know like if this is the right place for you or not. So that is my story.
Definitely. No, really appreciate these insights coming from everyone. I think it's really powerful to hear how this happens. Alice, what's your story?
Yeah, thanks. So this is the point where I feel like a complete fraud because I wasn't that child that looked out the bedroom window and went, oh, space. It's amazing. So I was always really keen on science and engineering, and absolutely focused on those subjects in my studies. And sure enough, by the time it got to me doing my PhD, I was doing a PhD in metallurgy. I was looking at solidification of aluminium titanium alloys. I know quite a lot about that, in fact. But one of the things that was getting in the way of the particular effect that I was trying to study was gravity, because as the liquid changed from, as the alloy changed from a liquid to a solid, the density changed and settling effects started happening. So actually, I had one of my experiments flown in space. So had the solidification experiment flown in the absence of gravity. Wow, you would think, right? Actually, I wasn't that bothered. I was just like, yep, fly it in space, get gravity out of the way. I'm trying to study this thing and gravity is getting in the way. So I was pretty kind of nonplussed. I finished my PhD, and my first real job, if you like, was working at the Science Museum. So I worked in a number of different areas in the Science Museum, but ended up in the Space Gallery. And again, it was wonderful. There were some amazing things. I mean, who can't be impressed when you walk past the Apollo 10 capsule every day to get to your office? It was great. But really, it was just the kind of big cash cow for the museum. It was the thing that really brought in all the visitors, etc. So again, all right. But I wasn't really that wowed. Then, whilst I was still working in the Science Museum, I started to get involved in Earth observation and started to really understand this incredible capability that space can bring. So the incredible opportunity that space provides as that unique vantage point, looking back on our own Earth and enabling us to study our own Earth. And from that point on, I was like, okay, space is cool. It's really, really cool. So it took me a while, but I got there in, around about 1999, I think, to be precise, was when I decided space was very, very cool.
That's brilliant. And actually, that's different. People get into industries in very different ways. And I think it's important to kind of realize that, and that it's never too late as well to enter into the space exploration industry and get really excited about what's out there. So fantastic. Clearly, especially for women still these days, entering into leadership roles, especially in, as we've sort of before the call started, space has previously been quite a male-dominated environment. What are some of the barriers that you've maybe had to face? What area that you've had to face, and how have you overcome that? Alice, maybe you'd like to kick us off on that one.
Yeah, thanks. It's a kind of an easy one for me, actually. So I didn't particularly feel any barriers as I went through my degree, my PhD, my working life. Things were really fine, actually. And in 2004, I had this child, so I've got 4 kids. They'd hate that if I call them kids. 16 is not a kid. Anyway, I've got 4 children. And I took a very large career break, actually. So I was pretty much out of the office until the back end of 2009, so nearly 2010. So this is already now kind of 11, 12 years ago. And actually, it was quite difficult to find flexible working arrangements. So I was really interested in coming back to work part-time. And there really weren't the scale and breadth of opportunities that there are at senior levels now. And I think it's really, really interesting to reflect, actually, coming out of this strange COVID world. Obviously, it's been devastating on so many levels. But there has been this thing about flexible working. There has been this thing that has been completely demystified. And I hope that as we emerge from this pandemic, there will be something about our approach to work and our ways of working that endures, and actually that will make the workplace a much more diverse and inclusive environment. Because really, we've seen that we can work flexibly in the main. So let's take advantage of that opportunity. How did I get over it at the time? She says on a large, over 100 people on the call, to my shame, I lied through my teeth. I went for those jobs, even when they were advertised as being full-time. And if I was lucky enough to get offered the job, I started a little negotiation. But, you know, I still work part-time now. It's not served me too badly.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that remarkable honesty there, Alice. Liz, how about you?
I've also been incredibly lucky and not come across any really major barriers. When I was thinking about this, I did note, I did when I was in the very early days of my career, I was coming off the graduate program that we had, and people who had done it 6 months before me automatically rolled off with a 10% pay rise. And when I did, and a much smaller cohort and more of us were women, we got 3%. And the argument was, oh, the world has changed like in 6 months, that much. And eventually I was, very forceful. I pushed it and I got you should be quiet and work hard or you won't get a pay rise next time round. And so in the end, I was quiet and I did have my 3% pay rise. And it took me, I think, 10 years to beat my peers in terms of a salary. So I learned how to do salary negotiations eventually and managed to not just equal those people that I had joined the company with, but leapfrog over them. And that was very satisfying when I finally knew that I was earning more than some of the men that I had started with. And then when I was thinking of, does that really count as a barrier or not? I was thinking maybe the biggest barrier might be myself and actually sort of really pushing those. Should I at aged 22 have not accepted that and really gone for it? And at the time, I thought I had done as much as I could. Could I do more? And so I'd say it's something I have definitely learned, is sort of standing up for myself and just really going for it. And so it's another barrier to be aware of.
Thank you. And I know there's a lot of research actually about how women feel the need to wait to be asked or to tick all the boxes before they can go for that promotion, whereas men are much more psychologically, research has shown, willing to just take and blag it. And I think it's always a really important point for women to have that self-reflection and go, actually, am I waiting to be more perfect than I need to try and go and see what I can achieve? But I'd say, Liz, it's kind of worked out for you. So.
Yeah, I watched a lot of TED Talks, I think, and learned some very incredible tips. Yeah.
Hessa, how about you?
I've also been lucky enough, I'm in a country that always give an equal opportunity for men and women when it comes to any kind of sector. And this is really good because it's very rewarding when opportunities are given to those who put the hard work in. So that wasn't a problem for me personally, but when it comes to developing a sector which is fairly new to the country, then there is a gap or personal challenge when it comes to knowledge. And knowledge is an aim and it's a challenge at the same time, because we're trying to build something new. And especially, for example, when the Emirates Mars mission was announced back in 2014, this is the first Arab planetary mission that we're undertaking. And we had no previous knowledge when it comes to exploration of other planetary systems. We only have satellites developed in order to explore Earth. And there is a lot to learn when it comes to that. So as we're developing our space sectors and our capabilities as a nation, the kind of methodology that we have been following was depending on knowledge transfer programs with different partners across the whole world. And this is across the whole projects that we have. So we always we have a project and then we seek out partnerships that in the basis of them transfer the knowledge. And this is how we work all as a team and we learn from each other. And this is how we build our national capabilities. So personally, when my biggest challenge was when I joined the Emirates Mars Mission Science team, because I graduated as an electrical engineer. I didn't have a degree when it comes to planetary science. So about 6 years ago, when I started this, I had no knowledge when it comes to Mars science and research. And I didn't want this to become a hindrance. Like, I knew this was a challenge that I needed to overcome, but I needed to find a way to overcome this. And I understand, and I always believe, like, growth always happens when there is a challenge to overcome. So I was focusing my positive energy in that. So within the mission, the way that we were able to handle this is by putting a science apprenticeship program. Every UAE national science team member was paired with a scientist in the field that had a lot of research and experience in atmospheric science, and this is the focus of our mission. And those were from our partners' university, and we worked in specific project, each one of us. So we learned by experience, and we had mentors, and we were meeting weekly with them, and sometimes we would do that face-to-face at least like 3 times a year. Of course, we can do that during COVID time, but it was very helpful back then to have this personal face-to-face time to learn and accelerate the growth of learning. And we can never, especially when space, like, we can never reach a point where we think, oh, we got everything that we want and this is enough for us. Like, space always has something new to offer us, and the learning is just continuous. So we started on this step, but it's a continuous learning, keeping up with the scientific projects, being always in scientific meetings, hearing others present their knowledge, present what we have to them, has been really like very rewarding experience to engage in more science. And we've reached a point where we are like conducting oral presentations and big scientific meetings, sharing our research, and the growth that happened during all these years, like, is just very inspiring to myself, and I hope it becomes inspiring to every youth and every person who's engaging in something new. Like, if you set yourself a goal, and even if it was very challenging and hard, like, if you put your hard work and the right approach, then you're able to get to it.
Definitely. I think that's a really important message, everyone, to remember. Whether you're just starting out or really senior, you can always achieve more if you're willing to put your mind to it. So, powerful work. I'm going to start taking some of the questions from the floor. If you're listening, do use there's an ask a question function, so do get your questions in. The first one up is from Tulsi, who asks, what do you think are the biggest issues we face in the space sector in terms of diversity and ensuring inclusion is at the forefront of the agenda? Liz, from a Women in Air Europe perspective, would you have some comments on that?
Yes, but I did lose the audio. Did you say biggest issues? Yes, but I did lose the audio. Did you say biggest
issues we face?
I still didn't hear it. Challenges. Thank you. So I'd say it's something that's definitely improving, but not always. Going back to in the beginning of my career, women were taught that if you wanted to succeed, you had to shout loudly, you had to boast about what you do, you had to take that seat at the table. And in effect, it was teaching women how to be more like men to succeed and to be able to get ahead and get promoted. What I'm really pleased about is that over the course of my career, this is changing. Now it is much more about teaching managers how to manage a diverse team, because people have realized that diversity is only beneficial if people are allowed to keep that diverse traits. And so there's much more in the way of, do you recognize your unconscious bias, and can you manage a diverse team? And it should be on the manager to notice that the person who's delivering on time every day hasn't shouted about it, but they have delivered on time every day and overachieved. And so I'd say within the space sector itself, it's something that's being acknowledged and people are working on it, but it's not necessarily fully embraced across the sector. We have about 30% of women coming in and studying engineering. In a lot of places, we actually see employment levels in the early careers at this 30% level. So first of all, we need to do a lot more sort of STEM outreach for the primary schools and the schools to get more than 30%. But then when you look at women as they progress up the industry ladder, it diminishes and diminishes. And so we are losing women through the leaky pipeline, as it's sometimes called. And there's a sort of a huge amount of research behind this, but you can do something about it as an organization, but only if you put structures in place to support the managers who are there already, and the people as they're progressing in their careers. So the space industry still has its challenges. I'm pleased that it's something that's been noticed everywhere, and that people are starting to do something about it. And I'll just say one of the key things really is for everybody in the industry to notice it and not accept it. One friend of mine is a man, and he will not accept a position on a panel at a conference if there are no women on the panel. Now, this is International Women's Day, so we don't have a diverse panel, and there are reasons and times where you wouldn't. But if it's a conference that is just a set of leaders or experts in a field, there should be some diversity in those panels, and it's everybody can do something about it. It's finding those little things to help.
Definitely, and at the BIS, I hope that we are, and it's definitely something that is very much on our radar. Next question. Oh, Alice. Alice.
Yeah, can I just come in on? Thank you. I just wanted to come in on the back of what Liz was saying. Just absolutely wholeheartedly agree her points, and I think what is positive is, just in the last few years, I think the business case for diversity has been made, right? I think you look back a few years and, paying attention to diversity and inclusion, people would do from a sort of a moral standpoint or because it was the right thing to do. But I think the business case is now made. People really do understand that it's only through having a diversity of views around the table. Today, obviously, we're looking at, gender as one of the points around diversity, but of course, there's many, many different lenses of diversity. But there is a recognition that having all those different views around the table is the way to support the best decision making, is the best way to go about business. So I think that's really, really positive. I don't think we're all the way there yet. I think there's still lots and lots of instances where we could do more. I think things like, diversity impact assessments should be the bread and butter of most modern organizations. They sometimes happen, they sometimes don't. I think you see organizations setting up diversity and inclusion committees, which is great. But I've also seen when those committees are being established, I've sometimes been the only female in the room and people look to me and say, well, it must be for you to be on that committee. Because you're the female, and it's just so missing the point. The point is diversity and inclusion is something, it's something for all of us to be concerned about, not just minority groups that are either in minority or underrepresented. So I think there's been some progress, but more to go.
Yes, thank you for that. And definitely it has to be an everybody question. It can't just be a woman question. So definitely important for everyone who's here tonight, men and women included, to think about what they can do in their own organisations. We have a question from Sarah, touched on, but it's slightly different and more to the point. All of you ladies are extremely inspirational. How have you taken your careers to such in a fairly male-dominated area? I mean, Hessa, your burgeoning space sector in the UAE, how have you found that?
One thing I really learned while being in the space sector is you just need to try everything and be open to opportunities. Especially like in an emerging field, there are a lot of space projects that are coming in. And sometimes you are focused on one thing or one project and you feel like, oh, I want to do this right. Then I want to focus on it. Maybe I don't want to take another opportunities on board. But then you're losing the chance to develop or explore something new or learn something that might be really eye-opener or enlightening and can change your career. So this is something that I've really learned, to be open to opportunities. And that's why I've been doing things in parallel. I've been working on science analysis for Earth observation satellites. And then when the opportunity came up to be part of the managing team of the first CubeSat, I was like, yeah, let me try it out. I'm going to put my name up. And if I was chosen, then I'm going to do that on top of my work. And then I was working on that, and the Emirates Mars mission was announced, and I was like, yeah, why not? Let's try this. Although like being part of the science team would be something really different than what I was used to. I'm an engineer. Like, why would I go into science? But then I started telling myself, like, why not? Like, if it's something that I'm passionate about, if this is something that excites me, then I should try it out. And this is how I've been moving through different projects, trying to find my own interest. And this is how I landed into science from being an engineer. And that is fairly okay. Like, I get this question sometimes. I have like 2 engineering brothers graduate, and they tell me like, do you still call yourself an engineer after all these years of studying? And I would say like, yeah, I'm an engineer, but I'm definitely moving into science research, and I'm really like happy with the way that I'm conducting my work, and I feel like it's adding value and inspiring students to enter the space field and the science in particular. So I found my voice regardless of what kind of program I graduated from, because by experience and by trying other opportunities, this is where you found your own voice and your own passion, and then you go forward in pursuing it.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. It's the saying yes when those opportunities come up. And it's especially saying yes when you think, really, is this for me? Should I be doing this? Because people will ask you to do something. And if you think you're not qualified, that's the wrong question to ask yourself. The question is, can you do it, or can you learn to do it? And will you enjoy it? And if the answer is yes, you absolutely have to do it. And you'll find a way to make it successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think fantastic, but I think also recognizing that your differences can bring strength, right? It's too easy to focus on their differences as being somehow a disadvantage, but actually your difference can bring strength. It's interesting. Earlier in my career, not really consciously, but I think I was very conscious of being quite young in the room, and also female. And I used to wear dark suits and things like that because I wanted to not stand out and try and fit in and things like that. And I guess as I've grown more confident, I am the person in the room that will invariably be in a bright red dress in a room full of dark suits, and that's fine. And guess what, it's brilliant for networking because everyone remembers you, right? So sometimes you can use the fact that you are a little bit different, or perhaps in the minority, to your advantage as well.
Yeah, I love my red jacket. And a pink one.
I do too. I do too.
Slightly vibrant top this morning. The first time I wore that, everybody said, "Oh, isn't that a bit colourful?" Yes, it is. Thank you. The next question is from Kalamira, who is studying her A-levels at the moment. So, Hessa, you may not be familiar with A-levels. That's kind of our leaving college before you go to university level of exam. Advice would you give to young women doing physics and maths A-levels and being one of the few women in that subject? You'd like to kick us off?
Gosh, that's a hugely open-ended. I mean, definitely go for it and don't let anybody dissuade you from doing them would be my first comment. Yeah, my A-levels were physics, chemistry, maths and further maths. So it was great. I sat in on a talk earlier today on International Women's Day, and there was a NASA astronaut there. And she was the second female pilot ever to be chosen as a NASA astronaut. She said that there was huge value in creating a network, not just for networking and for sharing knowledge, but in having support. And it really resonated, actually. And so if there are not many of you, you have to support each other, because sometimes you do just need to complain about something or see if somebody else is having the same issues as you. And it's sometimes nice to have a group of women that you can do that with. So it's find other people in your position, be they also doing science and maths, or you find the photography people or something else to create your group, but also just enjoy it and sort of learn to make your mark and take your place in the team and in the class.
Alice, Hessa, any words of wisdom for Kalamira?
Just what Liz said. Just what Liz said. No, I mean, it really is. I think you cannot underestimate that do what you enjoy point, right? I was just the same. In fact, I did maths, physics, and chemistry too. I never knew that, Liz. I didn't do further maths. I wasn't quite as clever as you. Anyway, and I just kept on doing what I enjoyed. In fact, I ended up doing material science and metallurgy because they're pretty much the synthesis of those three subjects. So I just kept doing the things I enjoyed. And there is just so much to be said for that. Don't let other people knock you off course, as it were. But I really would echo Liz's comments around finding a support network as well. I mean, it cannot hurt. It cannot hurt to find people in a similar situation as you. You can share stories, laugh at some of the hurdles along the way, and don't be put off your game. That's what I would say.
I would like just to add that sometimes our biggest enemy is ourselves. So just don't listen to those kind of negative thoughts that might come to you. Even if you're the odd one out, what's wrong with that? Just go for it. Even if you don't have people around you that is sharing similar interest of you, just because you have something different doesn't mean that you're wrong. You would be the odd person out, but then you would make a lot of difference, and you would be really an inspiration to those others that would follow you, because sometimes people get scared of taking the first step and you're doing it. So I would celebrate that.
Definitely. And Calamia has come back to point out that those are exactly the same that she's taking, Liz. Other maths, chemistry, and physics. So there we go. She's following in your footsteps already. Another quite open-ended question, but what single piece of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in the field of space?
Oh, network. It's the old adage is it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I would adapt that for working. It is what you know and who you know. And so you do have to know your job and then be good at it and excel. But go to as many events as you can. There's the National Student Space Conference that happened this weekend that also has sort of early career people. And then there are just a lot of space events, and a lot of them are free, that you can go to learn something new and to meet people. And you're already doing it because you're here tonight. And so well done. But yeah, just build up that network, that group of people, because that's how you kind of enrich your career and often learn about opportunities that aren't advertised in traditional methods. So that's mine.
I totally agree with you, Liz, and I would like to add that always ask questions. Once you enter the field, sometimes you feel shy. You feel oh, is this a dumb question? Am I supposed to know it? But there is no dumb question. Just ask anything, because there are a lot that you can find in the people around you in terms of their experiences that you wouldn't find in books. So this is the way to learn it. Just ask questions and you will get the answers.
Yeah, I mean, great answers. The only thing I could add to that, I think, is keep an open mind. There's a real risk, I think, when you...
Oh, I think we've lost Alice's network connection.
I think we have. I was just puzzling whether it was just me, but we have lost her.
But that is a great point to keep an open mind and which kind of goes back to the learning and asking questions, and also exploring, I think, different options of things you can do. I come from a very space geek background, so I've had to learn a lot of the other side of things. And if you're not a space fanatic, you have to learn to become one.
Always a good plan. Got a specific question for Hessa that Project Hope will inspire more women in the UAE to enter space careers and probably space education.
It did indeed, not only for women, even for men. When we started the project, I remember one of the objectives that we had is we would like to inspire youth, and that's why the name is Hope, is to put this hope into the Arab youth that everything is possible if you put your mind into it. So we wanted this project to be an example for them, to inspire them. And I remember we started in developing scientific outreach programs in which we wanted to give access to space science research to those students in universities. And we were looking for students who are engaged in science fields, and we didn't find a lot, like those who study pure math or pure physics. Like engineering was popular, but the science fields weren't popular at that time a lot. And within the mission, over the years, as we were monitoring and advertising for the mission and reaching out to the community, we noticed the number of students in such fields were increasing. So we were very excited about that. People were more confident going through these fields, knowing that there is a career path in front of them, that the United Arab Emirates is engaging in the space field, not once, but this is a commitment that is making. So that kind of trust that they had, that this field is there and it's emerging, like gave them the confidence to go to this field. We also found the change not only in the students and engaging in these science fields, like now there are research centers that are focused on space science, part of some universities in the United Arab Emirates. So that's another engagement that the students have within their universities, like having access to do space-related research within their home universities or a university near them. And there is even the space programs, like in terms of undergraduate degrees or graduate degrees that are coming up within the universities themselves in the country. So there are a lot of change that we've been able to see, like throughout the years of development of hope. And this is why the project was created and developed for the first place, is to develop the science and technology sector, to develop the scientific capabilities that we have within the country as well, and to increase the UAE's contribution to international science, so and increase the number of scientific research that can come out from the countries, from the project, and from the students and the universities that we have in here.
Thank you, Hessa. That's really interesting. I mean, also a sort of insight into why the Emirates have sort of decided to launch a space program at this time. So, and it's hugely exciting for the rest of the world to watch.
And I'll just add that it is wonderful to see. And this mission, I know you've done in collaboration with NASA in the US. You have to do one with the UK in the future, and we can do a mission together.
So the project was in collaboration with universities in the United States, and that was really something key to us, because this is where the knowledge was flowing. From 3 universities that we had in the United States, and it went back to the United Arab Emirates, and we're spreading them out to the whole community.
Fantastic. We've got a good showing of BIS Council members here this evening. So hello, BIS Council members. From one of our council members is from Ian Meek. He asks, what specific first steps do you think the BIS could take to encourage appropriateness in the space field? Alice, maybe you'd like to come in on that one.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Sorry, you might have guessed I'm having a little trouble with connection. Could you just repeat the question again, please?
Yes, definitely. What specific first steps take to encourage appropriate diversity in the space field?
Okay, thank you. So that was steps to encourage diversity.
Yep.
Great. Well, do you know what? This is a great start. I think there is something that is very powerful about role modeling, and there's something very powerful for, in particular, encouraging the next cohort of entrant science and engineers into the space sector to be able to visualize themselves in that successful career. So to be able to really see women excelling in their careers in space, and to be able to point to that and say, you know what, that could be me one day. So I think that point about role modeling is very powerful. So then what do we need to do about that? Well, events like this are really helpful. Thank you very much. I also think we heard Liz allude to other measures that you can take as well in terms of ensuring a diversity of panel representation. So making sure that when you're running future events, there is always that diversity on your panel. And I think really, you know, it's not something you fix, and it's not something that should be, you know, success is really going to be when we don't have to have diversity and inclusion champions, because success is when it's just part of the business. It's part of every decision that we take. It doesn't need to identify as a specific diversity and inclusion initiative. It should just be a consideration of the way we run our business overall. So I think, you know, we do need to take specific steps now because we're not there yet. But in all of those business decisions, we should be challenging ourselves and saying, am I being as inclusive as I can be in organising, for instance, this event this way? Is there a bit of the community that I'm missing? Can I make it easier to be more inclusive in the approaches that I'm taking? And I think it's that challenge back to ourselves every time that will be really successful in, you know, moving the pendulum here, moving the bar.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Alice's points. I think they're all excellent points. I would also say that you as the CEO is an excellent step in diversity and the face of the BIS. And I agree that it's having diversity within your organization, but it's also demanding it of people who you work with or that you support. If you look across business, as Alice said, there was this sort of diversity for moral reasons was quite well known. Then the business case came along. You can actually pinpoint when one of the largest investment firms in the world, BlackRock, sent a letter to its companies that said, we expect you to have diversity on your boards or we will no longer invest in you, when there were some significant steps taken by many companies. And so having that demand from somebody is can be very powerful. In the case of the BIS, whoever you give funding to, it should be done with parity and with diversity as a background too. If you do student projects, is there some diversity in those teams? And if there isn't, is there a good reason? If it's an all-boys school, you can't expect them to have a girl on the team. But if it's just because they've forgotten about it or not thought about it, it's something that you can encourage. And that would be a great way to do it.
Thank you, Liz. Actually, some really good points for us to take away and think about. So thank you. Hessa, or possibly a bit newer to what the BIS does, but is there anything that strikes you as really good practice we might consider?
I really like the ideas that were brought up. I feel like such events that are happening right now are great introductions to allow conversations to happen, and this is really exciting, and this is a platform for everyone to learn. Like even within the United Arab Emirates, like we found it very valuable to constantly have a platform where we can reach out and we can hear and listen what the community would like to have, and so it becomes a two-way conversation instead of one.
Definitely. Two-way communication is absolutely vital to any successful organisation. And we're running a membership engagement survey at the moment, and we really value any feedback from anybody who's here tonight, even who has some thoughts, you know, tell us what you think. A really interesting question coming up next. How can we ensure that everyone who wishes to join in the space industry but doesn't necessarily have a scientific or engineering background feels included in the sector? There are and will be many opportunities, for example, in business-related fields, etc. To kick us off on that?
Yeah, I can come in on that. So again, I'm sorry, I'm losing connection periodically, but I think that was about how we can ensure the inclusion of people into the space sector which aren't necessarily of a science and engineering background. Is that right?
Yep.
Broadly, perfect. Yeah, no, gosh, I have a real soapbox on this, because of course we need those scientists and engineers, but if we're going to be successful, we need more and more people who are actually the non-specialists. Now, I say that because if you think about the space sector, you know, it's very evocative, isn't it? You always are drawn to those rockets and astronauts and those really exciting exploration programs. But if you actually look at the structure of the space sector, you know, about 97% of the growth, about 97% of the jobs, of the of the money or the areas where you make the money is in the downstream applications. And these are the things that are part of our everyday society. So the ability to have ubiquitous broadband connection, for instance, enabled by satellites, the ability to access satellite navigation for all our logistics needs, for our transport needs, etc. Earth observation, you know, the ability to manage our climate, to measure what's going on with our climate and therefore manage it, to have accurate weather forecasts. All those things are absolutely in the heart of how we live. Now, what does that mean in terms of the growth of the sector and in terms of jobs? Well, it means that we need people that can communicate those benefits. And, you know, spoiler alert, sometimes the highest qualifications in maths or physics do not necessarily engender the broadest communication skills. So, you know, as an example, we absolutely need those people with broader skills. And very often, as we're reaching new audiences, new customers, new stakeholders, you need to be able to talk in a language that is meaningful to those communities. And very often that means not necessarily being the science or engineering specialist.
I totally agree with you. This is something that I found it really hard, especially engaging in very technical field, to come and speak to the public with simpler terms for the message to be conveyed and to be understood had been very difficult. So it was really helpful to have someone else like listen, for example, to the talk before I presented and give me comments like, I don't understand this term. You need to clarify it even more. And this is too complicated. People do not understand it in terms of students, for example, in terms of terms. So like sometimes when we get so much immersed in the field, we forget that like our communication has to be simple for us to be understood. And I guess like if we were able to explain it to a 5 years old, then we did a good job. Otherwise, like we need to do a lot of development in terms of communication. And in general, when it comes to the space sector, like I feel like the understanding that this sector needs not only scientists and engineers, it needs more than that. It's very inclusive. Like scientists and engineers are only like one part of the puzzle, but you cannot complete it as a whole without having all the other majors collaborating together to flourish this sector. So we have like the scientists doing the science research, engineers building the rockets or the satellites, and then we need like people in communication to communicate back the knowledge. We need the educators to put out the word, to teach these kind of concepts, and then we need people from finance, because we need budgeting when it comes to these projects, and then we need contract people because we need agreements to put forward when developing these projects. So everyone has a different role depending on their experiences, and they're all needed. Like scientists and engineers cannot run a space program on their own.
We'd like to think so, but we can't. I've seen there's some discussion in the chat on space architects as well. And I know a fantastic architect from Germany who's been designing lunar habitats. And I know the BIS has just done its recent study with Barratt Homes, which I was so excited to see, on how you can live on the moon. Yes, there's definitely something for everybody. I would add there's been a recent skills report published for the space sector. And one of the things it has noted, though, is that we are often a little bit insular as an industry, and we recruit from the same pool of people. And we do say that the space industry is like a sort of extended family. And whilst that is great, we are possibly at fault for not reaching out wider to get people from outside the industry to join. And so it's something that the skill study noted. And how can we get people who work in other industries and run conversion courses to get them into space? Or how do we just reach out to those people out there who don't even know that they want to work in the space industry and show them the amazing jobs that we have?
I mean, every job can be a space job. I had a conversation recently with the guys behind the Space Skills census. And what is a space job? It's any sector. So there's always a way to get involved if that's your passion. And I thoroughly say that it's a great industry to join myself. Okay, here is a big question. So, and it's really been upvoted. Where do you see the space sector in 10 years, asks Grace, both in terms of women in space and in terms of projects? Are there incoming missions or projects you're particularly excited for? Hessa, I think you'd probably have quite a lot to say on this.
Yeah, I will try my best to put it into words. So 10 years from now, I think we're looking even ahead than 10 years. Like back in 2017, the United Arab Emirates put a program called Mars 2117. So that was when it was announced, 100 years program that aims for Mars settlement, like in 2117. And the reason for that program is not, it's like, this is something about the United Arab Emirates. Whenever projects are announced, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey that takes you there. So this program was set to put a vision in place to direct the space sector on the kind of projects that we will have. And it has like main pillars. Like one of them is collaboration and partnership. And this is, I feel like, something where I can see the space sector like getting more of, because like we have, for example, a lot of interest from many countries when it comes to Mars exploration, but we don't want redundancy in terms of missions or science or data. Like we want more collaborative effort in order to explore a planet. And whenever you have like big challenges, you want to feed each other knowledge and learn from each other, so we're able to have like huge return when it comes to knowledge for humanity development as well. So that's one way I can see like the space sector moving on, or this is what I hope that it would be. The second thing, and this is part of the pillars that we have, is when it comes to infrastructure development. Like in the United Arab Emirates, this is something that we're looking into, like building facilities that enable space science research. And this is, well, like while talking about projects that I'm excited about, like when it comes to sample return missions, like this is where we're having missions go to Mars and bring samples back. I feel like this is just amazing, like to have the ability to take something from another planet and then bring it back and have the facilities to make sure like it's non-hazard and it's safe and you're able like to explore it. Like it will open, I feel like, huge doors when it comes to knowledge and exploring space. And then we have like education. This is something that I feel like it would progress over the years, like how we can keep up the academic programs that we have up to the industry and the needs of it. So it might be, and there's always a gap that needs to be filled. So connecting both sectors together in a more tight way would be the future.
I think
it's Go on, Lisa.
No, go for it. I thought you had frozen, so I was going to jump in.
No, it's just my face. I'll carry on. I think it's a brilliant question. It's a brilliant question. I think I would go back to a comment I made earlier on this session, which is about the recognition of the tremendous power of space for managing our own planet, and that really unique vantage point that enables us to see what's going on in our own planet. And if we look at challenges that our own planet is facing, if we project, that 10 years, climate change undoubtedly will still be one of the key issues affecting all of us around the world. I think we look at, our appetite for data, right? We're still data hungry, be that in, being connected. This famous kind of leveling up word. So we use it within the UK, but of course we talk about it across countries as well, really enabling all countries to enjoy a level of prosperity and security and modernization. A lot of that is enabled from space. So what does that point you towards? A lot of it, I think, points you towards capabilities that will be delivered from Earth orbit. And already we know those Earth orbits are quite congested and contested. So as well as the opportunities in 10 years existing in those orbits, we will also have to bring forward the capability to manage those orbits. Space traffic management is a concept that we're talking about more and more. We've been really shy about talking about that for, wow, quite a few years now. But now, indeed, people are talking about not just our situational awareness, not just knowing what's going on up there, but actually bringing forward, management of that operating environment. And I think, I'm afraid, we'll continue to see the space domain used for defence purposes as well. If you talk to some of the kind of strategic leaders in the field, they talk about space offering the third strategic offset. What do we mean by that? We mean by having a unique capability in space. You will have some kind of head and shoulders advantage over your adversaries. So all pointing towards increased use of those orbits. Alongside that will come things like the ability to remove debris from space, the ability to more closely manage those operating environments. So as well as those great steps in exploration, I do genuinely believe that we will see more focus on the orbits coming around our Earth, simply because I think invariably they will be the answer to some of the most pressing problems for us back here on planet Earth.
Yes, I'd echo all of those as excellent points and things that we are working on already. I would add there's a phrase that's started to be used, the orbital economy, to building things in space, and we've already seen a 3D printer on the space station, and can we take that bigger? And the first steps in that are the debris removal, and having things that can move and be manipulated in space. My boss is very fond of a quote that says, when people are predicting the future, they very much underestimate the next 2 years, but overestimate the next 10 years, meaning that a lot will happen in the near future that we haven't even thought of and are not planning for. But actually, the far future is a little bit slower than we think. And we can see how long the moon ambitions are and the Mars ambitions, and you can sort of see the truth in that. But I'm really looking forward to the American Artemis program and the moon exploration, and it would be great if in the next 10 years we did see boots on the moon, as NASA has its quote, and the first woman on the moon. So I really hope that comes to fruition, and that we as the UK are a part of it in supporting the program as an international partner.
I think some really exciting different answers there, actually. And I mean, certainly the environmental and sustainability in space data the BIS is very excited about. And in fact, our Reinventing Space conference in June is really focusing on this, which is in many ways even a bit less glamorous and exciting as these missions that actually take people to the moon, get rovers onto Mars, and that really capture imagination. Another question from a council member, from Steve Salmon, and that is, what do you think is the best way to encourage young students to become STEM ambassadors to inspire younger school students with their passion and experience? Liz?
Well, we actually mandate that everybody that comes onto the graduate program has to choose to either be a STEM ambassador or work with universities on a project. And so if people really, really don't want to, they don't have to, but we are strongly encouraging and people to do so. And we are fortunate to be a large company, so we can afford to give people, I think we certainly have a budget for it, but a few days a year to do those outreach opportunities and to go into schools, not just early careers, but anybody within the organization. It's much more difficult if you're working for a small company, but there are plenty of evening clubs and activities that can be helped. And so, yeah, it's really about encouraging them and sort of letting everybody know what the opportunities are. So the STEM network provides a lot of events that people who are not linked to an organization who do outreach activities can sign up to and help that way. So I think what can we do? It's probably trying to raise the awareness of what you can do, and getting people out there. We have now our current British astronaut who's doing an incredible job at outreach and encouraging people along. And maybe we need to get him to do some more promotion of other things that everybody else can do as well, to really raise the profile.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great initiative at the moment, isn't there? 1 million STEM interactions, which is a pledge that's been made across the sector, and it really is a call to arms, right? It's a call to arms for everyone to kind of do their bit. Personally, I think, and it's a bit of my soapbox, as you probably by now, I think we need to take advantage of that really, really inspirational, exciting bit of space, which is so well embodied by astronauts and exploration, etc., and use that as the stalking horse to be able to of activities that actually encompasses our space sector. So very often we'll talk about, and yes, you can be an astronaut. And by the way, there's a call out for an astronaut right now from the European Space Agency program. So, sharpen your pencils, everyone. But, that one very visible character, behind that one character lies thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs in the space sector. So, it's really important that we take advantage of that to shine a light on the breadth of career opportunities in the space sector. As I said earlier, with 4 kids, I have done numerous, uncountable numbers of schools talks. They really have had their pound of flesh from me. And I have to say, what goes down really well is the mocked up astronaut suit. So it's a replica of Tim Peake spacesuit, but sized for your average 10-year-old child. They're all absolutely hook, line and sinker. So, you bring that out, you get everyone trying on that, but then you use that as an opportunity to talk about that really, really wide range of career opportunities that there are in the space sector.
We take clean room clothes with us and get the kids to try on that. I just think any dressing up they love, and with the hairnets and the overalls and the shoes and gloves, the full works.
I totally agree. I feel like the more we bring them closer to the place that we work in, the more they feel it's relatable. And I found by experience, especially when not talking about younger kids at school, but talking about university students, like this is where the mindset is something that you need to conquer and overcome, and to make it more relatable. And I found out that if you brought students like from their age to go and speak to them, it becomes more powerful, because sometimes we go and speak and give some talks and they would feel like, no, something must have happened to you, right, to reach where you are. So to them, we might not be very relatable, or they would think like, no, we're not alike, no matter how much we try to connect with them. So one thing we kept doing, we have a lot of scientific outreach programs. So whenever we have students engaged in our program, so we would see the potential of who, for example, are excelling in these programs, and then we will make them our speakers. And this is how they reach out to their own peers. So it becomes like one of them, it becomes more relatable. So they are influenced even more than us sometimes talking to them.
Fantastic. And I mean, it's certainly the BIS does lots to try and do outreach. And for people who are out there who maybe think, I've got a story, I'd like to go into schools and tell this with students and, tell them about my experiences. Again, get in touch, get involved. We can partner you up to do some of that work. So it asks, what were your most valuable experiences in university or your early career? And if you were starting again, what would you change? Liz, do you want to set us off on that one?
Most valuable experiences at university. Well, I mean, I was very lucky, I have to say. I did some fantastic things at university. I joined UK SEDS, the UK Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, who ran a trip each year to Russia to something called the Space Theory and Development Workshop, which sounds very dry, but actually was a trip around all of the major companies in Russia that built the space hardware. And so I've touched Yuri Gagarin's space capsule, and I've sat in a moon lander that never flew and did some amazing things. So that was hugely inspirational. I did a summer internship at Caltech. Again, because the university had some connections, and so somebody told me how to apply and the right things to ask. And so I actually worked for a commercial company called Blastoff, which was run by Peter Demandis at the time. And the highlight was a video call with Arthur C. Clarke to tell us tips on making rovers relatable to people. And that was actually something that I was paid to do. Just incredible. So that was a real highlight. And yeah, this is also a case of just sort of going for it and saying yes to opportunities. What was the second part of the question? Was what would I do differently? I mean, I'm not sure I would change anything other than I was much quieter and shy in the early days, and it would have been great to be a bit more outgoing, but would I have done the same things the same way and ended up somewhere different? I don't know. So I think, yeah, I'm very happy with my life journey so far.
Excellent. Hessa?
Well,
So when it comes to my university, I also value my internship experience. So I was very lucky to be chosen in a sponsored internship that was done in Germany in a chip manufacturing company. So there were 30 students from the UAE, like 15 female and 15 male, that we were able to travel and spend, I think, 2 months in Germany. And that was something really new to me. But that was the first time that I traveled alone without my family members, and that was a big deal to them. My mom would call me every day, and if she didn't hear from me, she would think that something bad had happened. So that was quite an experience for me and her as well. But it was like a journey of, I guess, independency, exploration, learning something new, being in a different country, and just getting to know a lot of peers that I didn't have a connection with before and I didn't know. So like overall, it was a cultural experience, eye-opening when it comes to technology and what is out there, and getting to learn even more about myself, because I was able to put myself out there and get out of my comfort zone and to try something new. So that's a really valuable experience that I had within university. And I think like it changed me as a person. It gave me a lot of confidence going to my senior year and then going to the workforce. And whether I would change anything, I don't think so. Like, just like Liz, I'm so happy with where I ended up to be. And I believe like every step in our life, like even if something happened to us, which we don't like, eventually it will take us to a better path of where we're supposed to be. So I have no regrets, and this is how I live my life. So I'm happy with every decision that I made.
Gosh, that's really powerful, Hessa. You need to write a book. We need to follow you. I'd say university-wise, there was two really important things for me. So as an undergraduate, I was lucky enough to spend a year studying in Finland, actually, and their university system was very different to the UK. Each degree was quite tailor-made. You could choose modules that you really wanted to look into in more detail. So it was almost like a try before you buy type approach to a degree. And that was really, really helpful to me. So I was able to spend my second year trying all sorts of different bits of disciplines around material science, which ultimately led me to select down to do a degree in metallurgy at the end. And during my PhD as well, I would say the really, really important thing, a bit like as Hessa was just saying, was having that industry connection. So I was sponsored to do my PhD, which was great because I had an additional bursary. But what was really important was that it meant that there was people that really cared about my research. I think sometimes the research path can be quite lonely. If you're not careful, you end up looking at something that is really very niche. And having, in my case, the industrial sponsor and also their customer actually coming along to all the quarterly meetings with, you know, a real vested interest in my research was really, really powerful. Gosh, what would I do differently? Also very happy with where I ended up. Not that there was a plan, but this is life. If I were to go back and talk to my kind of early 20s self, I would say network more, talk to people more, follow the process less. I was very, very lucky in where I ended up with my PhD. But that was, again, as a result of a series of kind of unconnected decisions, which led me to a conference, and frankly, most of it was way above my head. And there was one person in that conference that communicated really well. And he was the only person that I felt comfortable approaching, in the coffee breaks, because he was the only person that I thought I vaguely understood what he said. And in the end, I met his supervisor, met his industrial sponsor, et cetera, and ended up doing my PhD at Cambridge. But if I was just looking at the process, if I was just following the process of just applying for the PhDs that were out there, I would never have ended up in that situation. So, network more. It will inevitably be as valuable to you as following a standard application route.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. I echo the networking more than anything. The other thing that occurred to me as we were talking was actually at university, there were a couple of really small things that had a much bigger impact than I expected. So I did my physics degree, and most of the learning was very standard, with lectures, with labs, with courses. At Leicester, they did a few sort of on the side courses, one of which was called directed reading, where you were given a topic to go away and research by yourself and then present to a group of your peers on. So you learned how to source the scientific papers, read the latest articles, create a talk on the topic. And that proved hugely useful to get to work and realize you had to do presentations on a very regular basis. And the second one was something called general physics, which was a lot of fun. You would be given a question that you had to answer. You have a week in a team to do it. And the questions were something like, can hell freeze over? So there was no right or wrong answer, but you had to use some verifiable physics to prove your case to a professor at the next week. And so you learnt to take bits of physics that you learnt from all the different courses and mush them together to give you your answers. And although they were courses that were run either in the evening or quite late in the day, they were ones that proved hugely useful throughout my career. So look out for the interesting side things that you can do that will teach you the wider lessons as well as the coursework.
That sounds brilliant, Liz. I wish I could do that kind of course now. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, sadly, it was a tiny piece of what we did, but it was really good fun.
We've got a couple of questions that are just more broadly about the space sector. So first of all, Andrew, our environment on Earth is becoming ever more fragile. What do you think the space industry can do to limit its impact on the environment and also reverse environmental damage? Who'd like to kick us off on that one? Alice, maybe. Or Liz.
Well, so, I mean, as a big industry, it's certainly something we're looking at. Airbus has selected some of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals to make sure that we can do our part, and one of those is the environment. And so we are doing things on the kind of local company level. We've got rid of all reusable cutlery. It's all compostable. We've got rid of all coffee cups. You have to bring your own. They gave away nice Airbus branded ones. So there's something that every company should be doing on that small level. But there's also the really big things. So some companies are looking at green rocket fuel or sort of recycled biofuels for rockets. Satellites themselves in orbit are lovely and green because they use the solar power, but the making of them isn't always. So some of the chemicals have been phased out, and there's research into what can we replace them with? How can we have cleaner, safer manufacturing methods? And it's all being monitored and tracked so that we can show that we are being better for the environment. So it's definitely, I mean, as the space industry, we're more aware, I think, than others, because the side of it that is doing this Earth observation can see very clearly. So we are building the satellites to tell us that we are doing things wrong. And so I think as an industry, we are certainly moving, I think, a little faster than some of the others, possibly because of that awareness that we have. And so, yeah, it's interesting times. There's always more that we can do, but it's really great to see some of the steps that are being taken.
Yeah, I mean, Liz has made the points around manufacture and operations, where I think it's a pretty generic issue for business in terms of where they can, make climate efficiencies, make climate savings. But I do think the sector is more aware than most. I think, we should be proud of that. It is that Earth observation capability that was, for instance, able to detect the ozone hole and able to monitor the steps that we were taking in order to see that ozone hole close up. It's also the sector that has seen rise to some really innovative businesses, actually, which are looking at, if you like, the heaviest polluting industries. So, typically in oil and gas extraction, and being able to sort of shine a light on that and help those industries be more environmentally responsible in their operations. So I think there's something that the sector themselves can pay attention to, but as Liz has said, especially around manufacturing operations. But I think there's also something that the sector can contribute more broadly, globally, in making sure our activities are more environmentally sustainable.
Hessa, what's your take on that?
Sorry, I've been trying to unmute and it wasn't working. Okay, I think, or I really believe, like, one of the things that we can use Earth observation satellites for is not only monitoring, but understanding our planet as a whole. One of the big advantages that these satellites are offering us is coverage in terms of information. So we're able, like, to monitor constantly. Instead of having like specific sensors around Earth, like we're able like to get comprehensive data around the whole globe for like a short amount of time and very frequently, and that gives us a lot of understanding when it comes to our climate. So we're able to understand it more, so we're able to make changes to it. Another thing that I feel like the space industry offers, this is in general when it comes to space exploration, is technology. So there are a lot of spin-offs that comes from space exploration, even if it wasn't developed for the environment itself, it can be used, because like space has a lot of challenges. And as it was mentioned, like there are a lot of technology that is developed to use like clean energy, and how that is taking place, because we don't have like that's a lot of resources when it comes to space. So even thinking about like other planets' challenges will bring up spin-off technology that can help the environment back on Earth.
And I mean, we certainly at the BIS had a hugely fascinating talk actually last week from ESA on Earth and the data that this gives us in terms of climate change, loss of polar ice caps, all sorts of information that can be gained through remote observation. So I think there's a huge amount that the industry is doing to really tell us what we're doing wrong on Earth, and therefore help us to take what society needs to. Sam has a question, which is also a bit wider. What do you think about commercial stations and infrastructure from private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and their rate of innovation? Who'd like to kick off there?
So I have followed a company called Axiom Space, who are planning to do they're hoping that they do the first commercial space station. And they announced recently the astronauts that would ride to the ISS for the first fully commercial space mission, and it will go on a SpaceX rocket. So I don't think as yet SpaceX have plans to build the space stations. They're much more about getting people to the locations with their long-term goal of getting to Mars. But certainly there are some really interesting other companies looking at doing it. I was a little sad to note that the first 4 people on the first fully commercial mission are all men. Somebody pointed out that their ticket cost is something above $50 million or more, because they're helping fund the company. I was like, surely there are some female billionaires around who quite fancy a trip into space, but maybe we haven't found them yet. And so it's not something that we have been part of in the UK yet, building space stations. Although in Europe we have a lab on the International Space Station, and we're helping other commercial access. So ESA has something called Bartolomeo, who was the little brother of Christopher Columbus. So Bartolomeo is on the outside of the Columbus module. And there's a service that you can, as a student or a university or a company, you can get your payloads to the space station in a much easier way now than before. And Airbus is one of the people doing this, but there are others. So it's the commercial space is really opening up, and access to low Earth orbit and doing your experiments. So as Alice got her experiment into space as her PhD, there will hopefully be a lot more people who can do the same thing shortly. And it's quite an exciting space to watch.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think you have to be slightly careful with language. You know, what we understand to be commercial is quite different from what other people understand to be commercial. So quite often when we're talking about commercial space, we're talking about procurement from the commercial sector of things that governments want to do, as opposed to governments building those same things from scratch, you know, using their taxpayers' money. So I think it is a little nuanced. And I think, you know, at the moment, we're definitely in the camp of most of the commercial, quote unquote, activity that you see is actually the private sector offering a solution to government funded programs, as opposed to the private sector being able to, you know, turn a profitable business out of, for instance, building space stations. You know, maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there. But I think it's important that to sort of recognise the distinction. Of course, you know, the likes of, you know, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have achieved amazing things, and you know, you can do that when you've got billions and billions and billions, right? And you've also got a very good anchor tenant customer in the NASA programs. But there is a bit of a joke, isn't there, in the space sector, which is, you know, how do you make a small fortune in space? You start off with a big fortune. So I'll leave it there.
I would like to add that I feel like private companies, like in the space sectors, are very critical, especially when it comes to building economies around space. Like having competition, like encourages innovations between companies, and that's something like would nourish the space sector in every country. So that's something to look forward with. Another thing that comes with private companies, not only like you mentioned about like offering solutions. So that's something that is related to cutting costs. So that becomes like something or an enabler that can facilitate space projects to be done in lower cost. Thus it becomes more accessible. Thus we can have a return of benefit from these space programs even more.
Thank you. I think some really interesting answers there for Sam. Getting to the last couple here. So Alex says, all three of you said that you were lucky not to have experienced barriers, apart from in Alice's case, looking for partner work. From speaking to other women in the industry, how typical do you think your experiences are? Have other women that you've talked to experienced barriers, either or more recently? I mean, Hessa, how is that in the UAE? How does it look over there? I think you've got quite an unusual team.
That's very common. Like we have in the space science department and Mohammed Space Center, we're around 70 to 80% women. So we talk between us, and we have a very similar experience when it comes to being offered the opportunities. Like opportunities are there. It's just, it depends on us building our capabilities in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, and like the fruits is there, just like we need to grab it. And I feel like we're blessed to have these opportunities available to us in order to grow ourselves. So if you have the mindset and you have the passion and you put the hard work in, you get the reward.
I wish I could remember who said this, but I saw recently a comment that said, as a woman, early in my career, I was not invited to do anything. In the middle of my career, I was invited to do everything because I'm a woman. This is so early in my career, I was not invited to anything because I was a woman. Middle of my career, I was invited to everything because I was a woman. And the end of my career, I am invited to everything because I am an expert. And I think there is something in that. There are some barriers, and I can't think of any examples at the minute, but certainly at some stages in your career, you are overlooked compared to a lot of your peers. But at other stages of your career, you are pulled out because you are a woman, and there will be some event or a media sort of request, and it'll be very specific. Do you have a woman who can talk about space, please? And so you get a lot of different opportunities. It would be the bit that I'm really looking forward to is when we are invited to all of these things because of what we know rather than what we look like. And so that's where I'm hoping that we get to. And we as an industry need to sort of help everybody along to get to that status.
Interesting. Yes. Alice?
Yeah, I couldn't put it better. I absolutely couldn't better. And maybe we're mainly in the middle at the moment. We've got beyond the first stage. We're a little bit stuck in the middle. And I think the more that we can do, again, it comes back to kind of role modeling, really, doesn't it? The more that we can do to demonstrate that it's because we're experts, the more we're going to get to that kind of latter category. And I think, we need not to be complacent. But certainly if I look around today, I think the barriers are lower than they were, say 20 years ago or so. So we're heading in the right direction. We shouldn't be complacent, and we should all be recognised for what we bring, regardless of, gender or any other lens that you want to bring to this.
Fantastic. A question from Alistair Scott, who is our past president and still very active on our council. And I suppose also thinking about this for some of the younger professionals with us today. Would you say that being seen as active and outgoing by your seniors, perhaps as a STEM ambassador, can be beneficial to your own career? Yes, Alice?
Yeah, I think we've just lost Hessa, haven't we?
We have. We're trying to get her back.
Excellent. I mean, the answer's got to be yes, right? And it's not least because, maybe you're out there being active and, participating in panels like this, but actually you're also listening to other people. So it comes back almost to that networking point, doesn't it? Ostensibly, we might have been invited on this panel to, share our wisdom, our knowledge. However, I am learning so much from my fellow panelists. I am learning also from the questions that come in. So there's definitely a benefit that you gain by, being more active and prepared to put yourself forward for things as well. It's a two-way flow.
Yes, I definitely agree with that, and I learned so much as well listening to you and to everybody else on the panels that we get to sit on. I mean, there's certainly something to be said for visibility, and by saying yes to things and by practicing them. So sort of the experience that you gain doing it means that you get invited onto other things. So yeah, it comes back to that. Just say yes. Just say yes.
I may have missed this question, but again, from a slightly different perspective, in the UAE, is it seen as a good by seniors in an organisation, particularly for young women, to be perceived as being active and outgoing and doing outreach activities with maybe schools and universities?
Sorry, I was disconnected. I'm hearing a bit of echo.
Can you hear us okay, Hessa?
The sound is a bit fuzzy.
We'll try pressing on. In the Emirates, is seen as a good thing to be going out and doing outreach activities in schools. Can this be beneficial for the careers of who do those outreach activities?
Yes, definitely. So scientific outreach in general is perceived as something very critical, like linking the industry back to the schools, to the universities, putting yourselves out there to inspire people. It becomes like very crucial to us. The Hope Mars mission, as I mentioned, like one of the objectives that we had is about inspiring. So the scientific outreach program was one of the first steps that we had to do, and we had to instill to make sure that we are covering all the publics, the students in schools, the teachers, the researchers, even the graduate students. We wanted to target everyone and wanted to make everyone involved so they can be part of the journey. So it become a success not only for the team that is working in the Emirates Mars mission, but for the whole UAE.
Thank you. And then just to finish off with a question from our president, Jerry Webb. Where do you see yourselves? What is your own 10-year goal that you'd like to see yourself in a decade's time?
I can start.
Thank you.
Honestly, like when it comes to 10 years from now, it becomes a challenge sometimes to visualize where we would like to see yourself. But one thing I always have in mind that I would like to be connected to youth. I believe like youth is the future. I would like to see them more involved, to have more platforms for them to speak, to voice their opinions, to be able even to shape the future as it comes. In the UAE, we have a minister that is dedicated for youth to undertake programs that can enable you to give them the capabilities and the space that they need for them to flourish. And I would love to be myself in that point in 10 years, connected in there, to put the youth in the space industry and to see them as enablers and active developers and involvement and into developing the space sector in a standard that can be internationally very renowned.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that as well, because I think definitely, you know, the connection to youth, but for me, it's about societal relevance as well. And it's about that kind of impact. So I would love to be in a position where I can continue to have influence. I've really enjoyed these last few years in the space sector in the UK. I've really enjoyed seeing, as I would say, space grow up in the UK. You know, it's gone from being something which is really only associated with sort of science and innovation to something that is now recognized as really, you know, fabric of our everyday life, a strategic capability. You know, I could go on. So I would definitely like to be in a position where I can continue to provide that influence and continue to bring the enormous power and the enormous benefits of space back to everyday lives, both in the UK and really across the globe.
I think they are, I would echo, yeah, both great ambitions. And I would like to have a little bit of both of those, but I'm still waiting for my Star Trek future, and it's getting closer and closer. So I'm really looking forward to the UK launch program taking off and the sort of dawn of sort of commercial space tourism. So I've got my fingers crossed for Virgin and Virgin Galactic and the others that are coming through, and the Cornwall spaceport. And yeah, again, people coming back to, are we going to overestimate 10 years? It's taking a while. But I'm hoping that the UK really leads on some of this space tourism, that we become a place that is known for it and leading, and that I get to be a part of that somehow. And maybe 10 years, certainly within 20 years, I want to have been into space.
Thank you all for all the questions that you've answered for us tonight. And I mean, we've had from all across the world, we've had from the States, we've had from Kenya, we've had from Australia, we've had from all over Europe. I can't even begin to trace. And for an International Women's Day event, I'm really happy that the BIS has been able to organise something that has been so truly international, both, as I can see, we've just lost Hessa, but nonetheless, I'm still really excited that we had her today, and our audience. This is just kicking off, as I say, a summer of women in space activities for the BIS. World Space Week will focus on women in space. We're going to have a whole range of YouTube activity around women in space, as I say, past, present and future faces, and we're really excited. And of course, as every woman says on International Women's Day, focusing on women and empowerment and growing representation is not something that should just be for one day of the year. That should be a year-round activity, and I hope that we can live that much in the BIS as everybody else tries to. I'd really like to thank Hessa one last time, because you missed in an international activity. And I know one of our council members is very keen to talk to you about whether there's a SEDS branch for students interested in space in the E. So potentially there's a bit more work we can do with you guys over there. Do keep your eyes on BIS. We have another Crowdcast event. If you've enjoyed this sort of event, you might enjoy our evening lectures. We have one next Wednesday. So that little follow button next to the BIS, we'll be talking next Wednesday about flight dynamics operations for ESA deep space missions. So do come along. It's free, get involved. If you're interested and you've enjoyed tonight, do visit bis-space.com and, you know, doing what we do, join us, read about us, get our magazines, volunteer for us, whatever might work for you. There's lots of ways to get involved. And finally, if you have do, of course, we are a charitable organisation. Do consider making a little donation. There's a little button down at the bottom. But now I'm just going to go around the table and whether anyone's got some final thoughts that they'd like to each share with us. So I'm going to start with Liz, who's next to me at the top of my screen.
Just thank you very much for the opportunity to chat. It's been great to be with such great women, yourself included. Alice, who I know well, and it's been lovely to meet somebody new, and especially from such an exciting part of the world at the minute. To people watching who are in their early careers, yes, go for it and network. And for the people who are well into their careers, from all walks of life, yes, see what you can do to support the people around you and to get others into our amazing industry, because it is such a great place to work and it's such a nice place to work with a great community of people. I feel very privileged, and thank you for having me this evening.
Hessa, you next.
I'm really honored to be part of this panel and to be able to speak my experience and what we have been through in the United Arab Emirates, like as an example of how we engaged in the space industry and how we're trying to building up and develop it. And I hope like our story had been relatable and you could have learned some lessons from the experience that you had, and most of all, like, inspire you to be part of this space industry, because like it's all about inspiration, and UAE like puts huge challenges up, and I think like this is how we operate right now. Like we look for challenges and we want to conquer them, but while we're working on challenges, one thing that we want to do is always look for growth opportunities, how we can be better and how we can develop ourselves. So these kind of questions that I would like to send to all the audiences is to always challenge yourself, like put big goals, be daring when it comes to your personal goals, and trust your capabilities that you're able to attain them. This is how you make changes. This is how you attain big achievements. And don't make yourself as the biggest enemy. Like, shut down all the negative thoughts that you have in your mind and just go forward for it.
Thank you, Hessa. I think that's very, very wise words. And Alice, finally.
Oh no, last to speak. How do I add to that? I suppose just one very simple message, which I think is, space really is for everyone. I think for so many of us, it felt like something that is for other people and that other people are involved in. And really, the main message is to take away the opportunity there, because it really is for everyone. And similarly, as we're talking on the International Women's Day, all those issues around diversity and inclusion, they are also for everybody. They're not just for those underrepresented minorities. So space is for everyone. Diversity and inclusion is for everyone. If we keep those messages in mind, we've got a really fantastic future ahead of us, I think.
Thank you, Alice. Great way to finish. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone who's joined us this evening. Thank you everyone who's asked a question. Huge thanks to our panelists. And I hope that we will see you all again very soon at a BIS event. Thank you very much. Good night.